From the Post Building in downtown North St. Louis, this is Inside City. Hi, Unity. It's great to have you at Inside City on this podcast. So thank you for giving us a few minutes today. And I just wanted to start off by I was talking about this a little bit earlier. Is how does somebody who's from Pittsburgh and DC and travel around with an MBA, I think from George Washington University, end up in St. Louis of all places?
Okay. Well, hi, John. Thank you for having me.
You bet.
I've been in St. Louis for almost 13 years, longer than I've been anywhere in my life at this point, which feels wild. I came here because my ex-husband was a professor and he got a job at WashU, and I was living in New York at the time. And, always been a big city girl. I've always worked in the arts. And I was like, where are we going? What's in St. Louis? And, but came with an open mind. And I was lucky enough, before I left New York, I was running a small organization, Manhattan New Music Project, and I had hired a consultant to do strategic planning, David Brewery. And he had recently started working with Stephanie Riven, who was the founding executive director of Coca here, and she remains a friend. And so I met her in New York. And as you know, St. Louis is a small town and very networked. So she was instrumental in helping me to meet some movers and shakers in the arts here.
That's great. And so, a lot of people end up in St. Louis because of family. So you're here indirectly because of that, but really those connections you made early on.
Yeah. Yes. So I ended up shortly after I arrived in 2011. I was having some coffee meetings trying to figure it out. I started doing a project with Amy Rome, founder of the Rome Group, on the side. And I heard that Powell Hall, the director of the Contemporary Art Museum, was leaving. Okay, interesting. So he was going to MIT to the List Center of Visual Arts, which is where he still is. And then a week later, I heard that Lisa Grove, the deputy director of the Contemporary Art Museum, was leaving. And I was like, they might have an opportunity over there. So lo and behold, I ended up going.
And you were there about 10 years. And,
I was there for 10 years.
You doubled their visitors, right, while you were there? Or can you claim that, or should we just say they doubled while you were there?
I think, I would say it's a team effort. And I worked really closely with Lisa Melandri, who's still there. She's the executive director. She's wonderful. She was a transplant as well. She came from LA. And about a year after I started. And we had a great team, and we did a lot of very cool things, and they're still doing cool things. And, and then COVID hit, of course. And so all the arts organizations are reinventing themselves again a little bit, but I'm very proud of everything that we accomplished at CAM.
Well, and it's interesting because being next to Pulitzer, that's going to be a big draw because of the museum itself by Ando, and people will come to see the museum as well as the name. But then in some ways, Contemporary had to really distinguish itself, that it wasn't just the next door neighbor to Pulitzer with some of the exhibits and whatnot.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I just went to their gala this weekend celebrating the 20th anniversary, and they were honoring the architect, Brad Klopfel, who at the time was kind of an unknown 20 years ago with Allied Works. And just this weekend at the gala, some of the former leadership were really reflecting on the fact that Betsy Millard, who was the director back then, said, we show emerging artists and new voices, like we need to work with an emerging architect. And they were really excited about what Brad was proposing. And he was really looking at how to respond to the Ando building. And, it is actually connected by the courtyard, and the design, again, is in response, but was also strategically sort of open and thinking about community and, big windows. And it was pretty visionary. He went on to do the Museum of Art and Design in New York, the Clifford Still in Denver. He's gone on to make a name for himself, as many of the contemporary artists that CAM shows do as well.
Yeah, that's great. You can, to your point, you can be at the Pulitzer in the back and into Joe and all that, and then wander over to the contemporary, although they may not allow you to do that anymore, but you used to
They
be able
do.
to do that.
They
Yeah.
do. And
Okay.
actually their hours match now.
I see.
And we did a campaign called See Art Together where we really tried to leverage that. It's a twofer. Come and
Yeah,
see
right.
both. And
There you
it's all
go.
free, which is incredible.
Yeah, and so I think in an article you may have mentioned how great the St. Louis art scene is in general as being accessible.
Hmm.
I don't know if that was for St. Louis Magazine or another interview about compared to other cities, we're known for that, for the free art museums. I think the only other city that really maybe does it better than St. Louis would be Washington, D.C., where it's all subsidized.
Sure. Yeah, it is pretty incredible. And we are somewhat spoiled. And now that I've been here for so long, I also balk at the prices when I travel around the world.
Not just for entry, but for parking, right? I mean, it's
Oh my God. Yeah, St. Louis is obsessed with parking. But yeah, no, it's amazing what we have here. And even thinking per capita, not only the cultural offerings, but the philanthropic support. It's an incredibly generous community. And I've heard that it's second most philanthropic per capita after San Francisco. I don't know if I haven't
it's
seen
a great
that, but
stat. Let's go
yeah,
with that.
we'll
Why
go with
not?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's been great getting to know the community. There are really like the movers and shakers that make these things happen. The fact that we're a relatively small city that has the Pulitzer, Tada Ando, that they decided, yes, we're going to have a world-class contemporary art museum. And then obviously the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, where I am now, that was another deliberate decision. And you're probably familiar, toward the beginning of, around over 20 years ago, the orchestra was having
Yes,
financial
struggling,
issues.
and I think not Andy Taylor, but I think Jack Taylor
Jack Taylor,
gave
yeah.
a gift that allowed the endowment so it could survive.
Yeah, and a lot
And
of
now,
other community members.
yeah, it's interesting because I've also heard that St. Louis is very good at the bricks and mortar, but not as much about the programming. And I don't know if that's really fair, but I mean, to your point, I think the institutions are significant for the size market that
Hmm.
we've become. And and so, yeah, you have the gift that the Taylors generously bequeathed, and then you now have this significant addition that's also going on, the bricks and mortar to go along with that.
Yeah, and even so back then, the story that I hear is it was a real just strategic decision. Do we just want, a middling orchestra, or do we
Hmm.
want to really make this special and
Hmm.
be at the top of our game, which, we're the second oldest orchestra in the nation,
Right.
or excuse me, yeah, in the nation.
Yeah.
Um, world renowned. Like I'd heard about the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra before I moved to St. Louis.
Yeah. We've had some really good fortune with not just the philanthropy, but I mean, when I grew up, Leonard Slatkin was the guy,
Exactly.
and then we've had other significant conductors that I don't know if I would say rival Chicago or New York, but can certainly hold their own. And some of the traveling and outreach that they do, not many people are necessarily aware of that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pride. And I've
Mhm.
I've also heard that about a third of the metro area has come through Powell Hall, has like experienced the orchestra at some point
Mhm.
in their life. And so it's sort of this iconic institution and
Yeah.
brand.
I mean, people kind of make excuse I'm from here, and so a lot of people don't necessarily have the pride. They're almost embarrassed to be from St. Louis, but we brag about the Cardinals, probably to the nausea of many people. But also the symphony is something. The
Yeah.
zoo, those types of institutions are we box above our weight in those areas, I think.
It's funny you say that because I feel like the transplants are all like so in awe. And, I have a family. It's a great place to raise a family. So,
Sure.
and I know a lot of transplants, and everybody's like, yeah, St. Louis is a great town. But
Yeah.
you're right. Reputationally, it's something that we need to work on.
Yeah. Especially the locals, I think. I mean, there's a pride of being from New Orleans. There's a pride even from being from Detroit or some of these, they're what I would call like the newer cities, like the Nashvilles that are up and coming, and the ones. But St. Louis has been around 250 years. It was founded, I think, in 1764, if I have that right. So it's an older city, but you have the legacy and history that's kind of both good and bad in a way.
Hmm.
Um, so talk about the substantial addition that's going on.
Yeah.
So the original theater, I think, was the St. Louis Theater from like the 20s,
Yep.
and then they bought it in the
Yep.
60s. Again, I think a philanthropy from, honestly, I don't even know who Powell was, but I'm assuming he was the major donor. And nothing's really been done for almost 50 years. So,
Exactly. Yeah. So St. Louis Theater opened in 1925. So when
okay.
we come back in, it'll be the centennial of the building.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so the symphony made it its Powell Hall its permanent home in 1968. And that's the last time it's been renovated. And I'm sure you're familiar with Powell Hall. It's gorgeous, but if you look too close, you can
Yeah.
feel that.
Yeah.
And even the seats, if
Right.
you're a tall person and you are,
Yeah.
you probably
Well, and
understand
the
that.
restrooms,
The
all the
restrooms.
stuff that you don't
Yeah.
even, and life safety probably, and accessibility, secure, all those things that are new.
That and like there's really no backstage space. It's a little shocking, like how little backstage space there is, and yet it's considered one of the greatest concert halls.
Hmm.
The acoustics are phenomenal, but from an audience experience and an artist experience standpoint, it needed it needed work. So it was time. So thinking about what the organization had become, so we're not only about 90 musicians and not to mention our admin staff, but we've got a youth orchestra and 2 resident choruses, and we do a ton of work in the education space. We needed more space. That, and you probably know from coming to concerts, at an intermission you had to choose whether you're going to the
Yeah.
restroom and waiting in line even if you're a man,
Right.
or
Yeah.
getting a drink. So,
Right.
and that's important, right? Like we think about, especially audiences today, we care about the whole experience, from
Sure.
how am I getting my ticket, where am I parking, what does the drink taste like, what happens after,
Yeah,
it's
those are
important.
table stakes. People just sort of assume that's going to be there when, and the Fox has similar situation, a similar era theater. At
Hmm.
one time, there were 4 of those, I believe, on Grand. Now there's just 2 that are left.
Hmm.
And so, you were talking earlier about the contemporary
Oh, the
museum,
architecture selection you're
right? And so
thinking of.
you've got a very modern uh, building next to a very traditional one, and in some ways, the modern one pulls back a bit from the street and reorients. It looks like that'll be the new entrance
We're going to have
and
4
4
entrances at
entrances.
different points around the building, which will be significant because right now, there aren't a lot of windows, not a lot of doors, and if we are very interested in being welcoming, accessible, and breaking down that barrier where
I see.
it feels like an elitist institution. Um, yeah, so I've only been at the symphony for a year and a half. So what I know, and I was working at CAM, so I've been paying attention to what's been
Mhm.
going on, and there have been incredible people involved. And I think similar to these visionary choices of Tadao Ando and Brad Klopfel, now we have Snøhetta joining us in Grand
Mhm.
Center. And man, what a cool like architectural tour. We'll have this beacon for the city. Um, so and I'm somebody with a visual arts background, and I'm so inspired. And Snøhetta has an incredible history working in the cultural sector internationally. So I do think it's an inspired choice, and I think it's amazing. Really needing to marry that historical with something that's incredibly modern, and similar to what I was talking to you about, with Cam and the windows. We're going to have these huge picture windows where you can see what's going on inside. You can enter. We'll have a 3-story lobby in addition to what you now know, as the foyer with the beautiful chandeliers. We'll have 3-story lobby with amenities on all floors, patron lounge. We'll have the backstage. We'll have an education and learning center. It's an incredibly exciting project, and I feel lucky to be coming in at this moment because I know it's been many years in the making.
I think a lot of people associate the symphony with the building. You know,
Yes.
Powell Hall is a symphony, the symphony is Powell Hall, but there's quite a bit that they do out in the community that people may not be aware of. You alluded a little bit to them on the educational side and the
Hmm.
outreach there, but there are things they do at Forest Park and other things as well. So
Oh
talk a
my
little bit about
gosh.
that.
We have over 100 community partners. We have a very robust community partnership and education team that are constantly in the schools. We're performing in prisons. We're working in churches. We're not only coming out to people, but then we're bringing them in. We have access programs. We just did a big partnership with the library for newcomers. Yeah, it's inspiring. And during COVID, the team really pivoted and went online. And so now a lot of our educational resources are accessible online. And I think last year alone, not only did we serve, I don't know, something like 330,000 students, but they were in 48 states and 9 countries.
Mm.
So that's incredible from, an outreach perspective, but also in my mind, a reputation perspective. It's really helping to get our name out there. And as you probably know, it's so important to really be investing in music education. So we luckily have a lot of grants and sponsorships and are able to provide resources for free for our communities. But yeah, with Powell Hall, we are nomadic. We've been nomadic this season, and we do have experience with that, right? We are performing around the community, but it's been an interesting season for us. And the silver lining, as logistically challenging as it's been, we've been meeting new audiences and new venues. And, hopefully we'll bring them back when we come back to Powell Hall.
I think in particular, the younger audience, right? And so if you could talk about how you reach the younger generation, I'm assuming through social media or those campaigns as part of the marketing. And I think part of your title is audience experience, which maybe those are two different things, but
yeah, audience experience. So essentially that means that I also oversee front of house. We do believe that, we can bring someone in, but unless they have a great experience and they feel welcome when they come into the building, then it's kind of all for naught. So we do, keep that all together. So yeah, we've been something I love about the symphony is we are, for as large and old as we are, 144 years old, we're surprisingly nimble and creative and innovative. And a lot of that culture does stem from Maria Lynn Bernard, our CEO and president. She's been there for 9 years, and the board. And there's just been so much support for trying new things. And that's a lot of my ethos as well. It's like, well, we have to try it. And especially coming out of COVID, and being in an industry, right, where the average age of our most loyal patrons is 75. A trend that we're seeing is that we do have younger people coming. They just don't come as frequently. And subscriptions are still a thing. That's something that in this industry, there's been talk for years, our subscription's dead. It's fascinating now that we are all subscribing to every streaming service
Right.
and all the other things. But no, subscriptions are not dead.
right.
It's just, do we see, I'm a young Gen X. Do I go to this? Of course, now I do. I go to the symphony all the time. But would I go 12 times a year? Maybe not, right? So there are I'm maybe looking at other variety in my cultural offerings. So we're adapting, and even the programming. So it's not only marketing, right? Yes, of course, we need to be doing everything we can on social and with targeted advertising and grassroots efforts and partnerships, but it's the programming itself. We had a very fun mashup recently with Brahms' Radiohead, and we ended up attracting a very enthusiastic crowd, and we actually were 42% over goal. There was so much interest, and there's just been a lot of experimentation on the artistic side as well.
I mean, I think the issue you've got is that classical music has this reputation as, it's music by these dead composers, right? Or it's the stuff that's easy to listen to was written a long time ago. And then you have this atonal movement that's in there, and the stuff that's newer sort of comes at you and can be a little bit more challenging.
Not
and
always. It can be,
yeah,
but yes.
but that's sort of the narrative or the reputation. It's like, it's time to eat your vegetables, and I'll go to the Fox for the fun show and maybe get the musical thing. But how do you overcome that as, Taylor Swift just dropped an album, right? And it would seem to me that just maybe it's apples and oranges, or you're not, that's a different audience. But in a lot of cases, music education is less than it used to be in the primary and secondary schools of piano and violin and just learning those types of things. And it's to me that would be the challenge of capturing the young people so that that average age can be brought down a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right on the education side, but surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, young people are also interested in classical music. And um, something that we think a lot about is the importance of our musicians
Mhm.
in really elevating them. You think about, like the sports analogy, we get really excited about the players. I think
Sure.
the same is true. We have these incredibly accomplished musicians. Many of them are quite young. And they live in your communities, right? And they're incredible. We also have a lot of soloists. We have guests that come in constantly, and some of
Mhm.
them are really good at and robust on social media. So I think in the sort of star space, there are the musicians as well. Like we opened this season with Hilary Hahn, who she's a violinist. She has an incredible social media presence, and I would say she's probably in the top 5 in terms of well-known
Nice.
soloists. We're ending the season with Yo-Yo Ma, who's probably number 1.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
you're able to get that talent here to St. Louis.
yes, and I think, that is a huge feather in the cap. Like we hear from these renowned artists around the world that they want to come to St. Louis. We have a great reputation. Our orchestra is friendly and welcoming and also so capable.
Well, and I think that's how you do reach younger people, making it fun that way, and it's not just a, stuffy kind of thing that, "Oh, this is the music your parents or maybe your grandparents listen to."
Well, it's funny. Yes. And there, it's sort of the gateway. So we have, for example, we have a guest conductor, Norman Wynn, who's a young guy that's always wearing like amazing red shoes. And he'll do a plug when he conducted
I
Jurassic
see.
Park last season. He said, if you like this, you're really going to like the planets. Come back for the
Oh,
planets.
that's great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so we saw it works. And even with Rite of Spring,
One of the
Stravinsky's,
harder pieces to listen to, right?
well, honestly, maybe it was also an incredible, like, Rite of Spring caused riots
Right,
when it
when it first
premiered,
came out,
right?
right? 100
Um,
100 years ago or whatever it was, right?
I think it came out in the 40s, but yes, we had such a young full crowd, and at the end, it sounded like a rock concert. People were
Oh,
like, "Yeah." It's
right.
so exciting, and I think once you break down that barrier of coming in and trying it and realizing that, yes, you can be here, you belong here, this is a
Mhm.
special experience, you come again. So, I think we're doing all right.
Yeah, that's great. So in addition to the creative director, you'd mentioned, I'm probably gonna miss Marie.
Marie-Hélène Bernard,
Yeah.
she's French Canadian, and then Stéphane Deneuve is French, so there's, like, a lot of
So we're
French right
pulling
now.
people again, a lot of people, these are not all St. Louis. I mean, the 3 people were,
Well, not
yourself and the
only
2
them, but
that
the
they're
musicians, we just had a COO join us from Cincinnati. We have a new VP, our head of philanthropy just moved here from Kansas City. We constantly are bringing people to the region.
and it shows in the number of tickets that are bought and sold.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it's an industry, well, not only us though. If I think about the arts community,
Mhm.
like it's relatively niche, and we do think a lot about talent development and making sure that there are opportunities for young people to be part of our industries, right? And there are so many different ways to be involved, from crews to on stage to behind the scenes and administration. But yeah, it's not unlike academia, right? Once
Mhm.
you're at the higher echelons, like if you're doing a search for a CEO or a music director, that's an international search.
So it sounds very exciting now with the big, capital campaign, the addition going in. You said so that won't be ready a year. Will it be a year from now, or when will? Because that's what everybody's noticing, I think, right now.
Yeah, sure. So we just went public with our capital campaign last week, Music for All, and our goal is to raise 155 million. we're over 145 right now. So we are
Wow.
looking to support from the community, and construction is underway. And we are planning, we have our next nomadic season on sale next year. Our main venues for our core subscription series are Stiefel Theater downtown and Two Hill Performing Arts Center on UMSL's campus. And personally, I'm glad that we have such different venues because they have been appealing to different audiences in
Sure.
different ways. And it's kind of a nice experience to have that variety. We also have a new chamber series that we launched this year, very successful at the Sheldon, and we will be continuing that. And I anticipate us continuing that beyond. That's been wonderful. We're at the Pulitzer, we're, at Lindenwood University. Anyway, so next year, the same. We're on sale. Our subscriptions are on sale now. Our
Great.
single tickets are going on sale this summer. We are anticipating being back in the hall September 2025. Our season is September through June, essentially, and we are planning that now and very excited.
I'm sure the contractor is checking every date, making sure that they're not going to be late for the first conference, because once those things get set and the tickets are sold, you got to be ready.
That's right. And we're now on budget, on time. We have an incredible team. So it's not only
Wow.
Snowhetta.
Did you say on budget and on time?
Yes.
That's not usually said during messy renovations, which I'm sure this is that.
Like I said, great team. So Snowhetta, not only doing architecture, but landscape architecture, we're looking at more green spaces. We've got BSI, we've got Christner, architect of record on the ground. We're working with Kierkegaard on acoustics, Schiller Shook on theater planning. I mean, just so many great team members. And then Anna Levy, who is she does a lot of project management around town. She's currently working on the Brick Line as well.
Mhm.
She is our project manager and our really owner's representative. And yeah, I'm impressed by our team. They're amazing.
And then in terms of program, so you'll be nomadic, but the program really gets set, I guess, as a combination of the artistic director and the conductor, and get together and figure out what that'll be. And does that get set probably a year in advance, right? They kind of know what.
Years in advance.
Years in advance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's funny. We're performing right now. We're in our 144th season. And so, or 23, 24, and we are still adding. We still have a couple shows that we're adding before the end of June. And then our orchestra will start playing as the orchestra for Opera Theater of St. Louis. And then they'll go on break. And then so our 24-25 season, our 145th season, is on sale. We still have a couple things that we're adding. We're newly announcing concerts all the time. But behind the scenes, we are already on 25-26. We'll be announcing that season mid-February next year. So February 25. So it's like juggling all the time. But we have a great team. And man, kudos to the crew and everyone else that has to deal with all of these logistics. It's been complicated, but they're doing a good job.
It's great. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You bet.